Okay, so we've talked quite a lot about investors over the last couple of days, and this is a real session where we can really get into this topic. I think it is crucial, so I'm really looking forward to hearing the papers. Do we have Benjamin Richardson on Skype or? Oh, hello, nice to meet you. Right, okay, so what's your name? Carol. Right, so we've got Carol representing her work with Professor Benjamin Richardson on reforming finance capitalism for sustainability. Thank you, over to you.
Thank you, Charlotte. This actually isn't my joint work with Ben. This is Ben's exclusive work, and I am just providing my voice for him. So first, Ben is sorry that he can't be with you for this final meeting of the Sustainable Companies Project, but he had to travel to Australia for other academic commitments. So in his earlier contributions to the project, Ben explained how financial markets have become an increasingly significant influence on corporate environmental behavior. That influence is often negative, but it also is occasionally benign and positive, such as through the growing SRI movement. This time, he's not going to rehearse his environmental critique on the financial economy, but rather let's sketch some ideas for legal reform of the financial sector. And although there's insufficient time today to discuss possible systemic changes to the entire financial system, Ben wants us to remember that these are crucial. This is also crucial if we are to have sustainable development. So, as you may recall from Ben's earlier talks and papers for the project, fiduciary law can be a significant obstacle to SRI, especially in institutional funds such as pension funds, which are governed on the assumption that unadulterated financial returns is the only lawful objective to fund management. The concept of fiduciary responsibility is old, but its content is potentially adaptable. The American Law Institute's authoritative restatements on trust law explain that trust investment law should reflect and accommodate current knowledge and concepts. It should avoid repeating the mistake of freezing its rules against future learning and developments. But while some positive change might ensue from more enlightened judicial interpretation of existing rules, can we really afford to wait? Hardly, right? So far, no legal action in any jurisdiction has been taken against fiduciaries for failure to invest responsibly, even in the narrow sense of failing to consider financially material, environmental, or social factors. In a few jurisdictions, such as Britain and Australia, modest statutory reforms have begun to tinker with the regulatory context of SRI while leaving fiduciary and trust law unchanged. These reforms favor economic incentive and informational policy instruments to stimulate SRI, but leave investors with discretion to make the ultimate decisions. These instruments don't require policy consensus concerning what is ethical or socially responsible. Instead, they procedurally shape investment decisions, thereby ostensibly providing more transparency and accountability, and hopefully real change. But the reality so far is less encouraging. Mandated disclosures sometimes entail vague, perfunctory statements that do not illuminate how SRI decisions are affected or their ultimate impacts. Process standards have rarely extended to democratizing investment policymaking, which remains dominated by fund managers, investment consultants, and other so-called experts. Economic incentives to alter the cost-benefit calculations of financiers in favor of sustainable development are also on the menu, and the lead example of this is the Netherlands Green Project Directive. Mandatory performance standards for SRI are actually rare. Belgium, for example, prohibits investing in companies that produce or distribute cluster bombs. Some US states ban investing in Sudan because of its poor human rights record. And a few states, notably Norway, France, and New Zealand, oblige their sovereign wealth funds to invest ethically without being overly prescriptive about what that should entail. Overall, the foregoing reforms suffer from being too ad hoc in targeting specific actors or SRI issues, rather than providing a comprehensive standard for promoting SRI. So what else should be done? Lots can be said, and the following remarks sort of speak on to two specific reforms of particular importance. So reform number one. We need to modernize fiduciary financial law to recognize the symbiotic relationship between the sustainability of the economy and those who invest in it. We should reformulate the duty of prudent investing in order to shift the market convention towards an enlightened, long-term focus that incorporates respect for the environmental conditions that underpin a prosperous investment universe. Ben's proposal is for a revised fiduciary obligation that would require trustees and fund managers to act primarily in the long-term interests of fund members. This would help alter beliefs concerning the value of long-term behavior, which eventually may become an investing norm internalized in the organizational culture of financial institutions. We also need a parallel fiduciary obligation on directors of non-financial companies, as some other participants in the project have advocated. Implementation of this reform could be facilitated by a cognate duty on financial institutions to report periodically on their progress in acting for the long term. Trustees of funds would report on their environmental impacts and performance, including active steps to reduce the risk of harm. This information would not only help regulators to supervise compliance, it should also help underpin a more informed ethical dialogue within funds for SRI. The principal challenges in reformulating the prudent investment duty toward a long-term standard is whether and how any limits should be set to the parameters of long-term and the remedies available to aggrieved parties. Whether an investment portfolio is in fact successfully managed for such a time frame might only be known with the benefit of hindsight many decades from now, at which point any available legal remedy might be nugatory. Therefore, a workable duty of long-term investing would need to be embellished with prophylactic rules that set performance standards for fiduciaries today. These standards could include to conduct environmental risk and impact studies on proposed investments, incorporate ESG information into portfolio management, make positive investments in environmental technologies and green businesses, among various possible indicators of a sustainable investment portfolio. And both fund member beneficiaries and regulators should have standing to ensure compliance with such standards. There are also a range of other collateral measures that should be adopted to incentivize long-term investing. For example, an excise tax on securities transactions and modification of capital gains tax rules could help incentivize long-term investing. Company law could reward long-term shareholders with weighted voting rights, while excluding from voting the shares acquired through opportunistic borrowing or equity swaps. And a reassessment of financial reporting obligations is also necessary to reorient investors and other market participants to long-term value. Requiring disclosure of information to markets relating to long-term values would help mitigate the myopic culture of financial markets. 1 minute. Okay. Reform number two. Also, a space within and among financial institutions is needed to allow for consultation, debate, and reflection on how to practice long-term investing for sustainability. The hallmarks of good prudential investing should include such consultative processes in the same manner that investors increasingly see engagement and dialogue with their portfolio companies as best fiduciary practice. Further considerations that behoove us to reform in this direction are that dialogue facilitates consideration of sustainability and other ethical issues in a local context and to allow for human agency. Given the plurality of values at stake in SRI, processes that promote critical reflection and dialogue may, at best, help promote congruence of viewpoint or at the very least ensure greater accountability and legitimacy for the investment decisions taken. The notion of prudential investing, as earlier discussed, should be understood to include appropriate consultation with and disclosure to fund members about any investment policy that raises important ethical and sustainability issues. It would be naive, of course, to expect more SRI would inevitably ensue from democratization of fund governance. Thus, complementary reforms, such as obliging financial institutions to take measures to not only inform their members about their SRI policies, but also involve them in making such policies through surveys and questionnaires, and having representatives on governing boards are important. Furthermore, we need one paragraph. Furthermore, we need participation from actors who are less likely to be motivated by financial self-interest. To this end, more consultative decision-making must be stimulated through the existing industry codes overseen by the UNEP Finance Initiative, UN Principles for Responsible Investing, and other collective forums, opening these regimes to non-business stakeholders such as human rights and environmental NGOs, such as BankTrack, would be more likely to garner active participation in critical insights to strengthen SRI. There is much more to be said about this topic, and I really encourage you to read Ben's new book, Fiduciary Law and Responsible Investing in Nature's Trust, which is by Routledge, 2013. It's a fantastic book. If you have any questions, please get in touch with Ben. His email address is richardson@law.ubc.ca. Thank you so much.